I don't know if they all go in a waiting room. I don't know how to do it, Karen, but we'll just say they're muted.
Got our post-its about.
Welcome everybody. As you're coming in, you might notice that we're putting everyone on mute. If we haven't done that yet, please keep your microphones muted. I plan on answering questions. I imagine there'll be several of them. We're going to ask that you put those questions in chat. Is that right, Karen?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, there's a chat icon within Zoom, and that's what I'm going to monitor for participant questions. And we'll give everyone just another minute to kind of get in and see if we can't build capacity a little bit. But and then I'll make some opening remarks and I'll start addressing questions. But if you know you have a burning one, put it in at any point in time. And then Maria, if you could just monitor if I missed something, if it looks like there's a pattern of questions, maybe I can answer them all in one bulk. But all right, Karen, does it look like the participants are slowing down?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll just begin. If someone joins us late, they'll have to catch up a little bit. But if you have friends who are watching this, we are recording it. We'll put the entirety on our website so people can watch it later. But thank you for joining us live on this Zoom Q&A with me. I have 3 topics that I want to address. And again, I imagine some of you will have some questions that will require some follow-up. And some of you might have some questions that aren't related to anything I just talked about. But I know everyone wants to know about the fall. But before we get to the fall, let me just kind of give you an idea of where we're at right now. And where we're at right now is, we're concluding our school year. We're wrapping up, collecting materials, getting ready for, graduation and things like that. Which is a big part of a normal year, but of course we're doing it with all kinds of variables that we haven't done it before. So, but a big component of what we're doing right now also is assessing what happened and your experiences with how our distance learning went over the last few months. So we put out a survey to all of our constituents. We don't have a ton of responses. It's close to 100. So it's a smaller sample size, but we typically work with about 20% of our population, so it's not bad. And the information that we got from that survey so far is pretty good. It gives us pretty much what we thought our biggest problem was going to be, which is communication. And a lot of people had issues with how grades were rolled out. We knew that would be an issue. The directives we got from the governor were pretty widespread. In Whitmore Lake, we did decide at the closer you got to high school to ramp up and modify some of those grades, and it did create some communication issues, but that's kind of ubiquitous across the board. What was good about it was people did really appreciate some of the communication tools that we gave them, the Chromebooks, the hotspots. It looked like internet activity was pretty strong across our district. That's different information than what I get from surrounding districts. It looked like most people didn't have an issue with that. So those are some good pieces of information for us to build on. We know if we have to go back to this, at some point in the fall, we know where we have some weak spots and what we have to address. Um, what does summer look like after we wrap up the year? What comes immediately after that? Um, you know, I'd say one good positive thing about being shut down for a few months is that we got all of our summer cleaning done, and now we're switching gears to more of a maintenance mode, and we're getting ready to start outfitting each of our classrooms with different types of technology. So normally we have to wait till July and August for stuff like that, and we're really rushing it, but we get a little early start on it. Um, we also are working on a summer camp program. We're doing that with a private partner. We have to wait till we're in phase 5 until we can do that. But we do feel like there's an appetite for more learning, more enhanced learning, to close some of the achievement or some of the content gaps that might have been experienced with this distance learning plan. So, that's something that we're working on as well. Um, and uh, and then of course athletics is the next thing that gets rolled out. So um, the governor's orders allowed for some athletics, but it has to start at the end of the school year. So um, we and it has to be outdoors. A lot of what happens in the next month is going to probably dictate what happens in the fall. So I can't really give you know uh, real detailed analysis of what I think is going to happen with athletics. Just that it looks like it's going to go, um, and it will probably have some restrictions related to um, fan viewership and things like that, indoor activity especially. Um, I'm going to jump right into some questions before I get into what happens in the fall, because some people are already addressing some of the things that I mentioned. Did the survey go out to everyone? Yes, it went out to all of our parents. We'll put it on the list to resend. Because it's something that we are evaluating and looking for strengths and weaknesses of our distance learning program. Um, Maria, thank you for already putting it up there. So if you're in the chat box, you should see it. Um, I'm going to jump into what I think is going to happen next in the fall. And again, I want to start with this caveat that I'm going to apologize if some of this sounds ambiguous. I don't have all the answers. It's the cards that I've been dealt are the cards that I play. And right now I have to make some assumptions because I don't know all the details. They haven't been given to me. And what I've learned from all of this in the last few months is information changes at a rapid pace. It's not intended to hurt anybody, but it certainly does change. So what it looks like so far is that we're on a progressive a route to phase 5, which is part of the governor's Safe Start plan. At phase 5, K-12 instruction can begin in person. The governor made a statement this week that she's predicting we'll be there by July 4th. That's good news. And we thought it would come probably later in July, but if it comes earlier, that's fine. What we are planning on in the fall for our return to learn plan is 5 days of instruction with students in our buildings. We, of course, are going to have enhanced hygiene protocols when this takes place. We're going to limit device sharing. And in fact, we're making plans as it relates to computer devices to be a one-to-one district by September. So, but a big question that everyone has is in regard to social distancing. That's going to be a significant challenge. I don't know that anyone's going to be able to pull that off. We've looked at, and that's in regards to keeping everyone 6 feet apart. We've done what people are calling, space mining activities. You look at your overall space of your district and you try to figure out what's available. And there are some things that we can change where we know we have high congregations of people, and how people enter the building, how people interact at lunch, how people interact in hallways, and we know we can make some adjustments there to make things safer. But once you get in the classroom, especially at the lower levels, it's really challenging to maintain a 6 feet separation. Teacher, student, they're often working close together, and we encourage that. So, how we address that, if we get some more guidelines from CDC or from our health departments or from the governor's office, that's great. But I'm not expecting a lot of detail there. I'm expecting just to kind of get a green light and try to fit as many safety protocols as possible into it. So we're still evaluating that. A lot of people ask me about masks. Um, we have made no definitive decision about that yet, uh, but it does look like from the things that we've evaluated that um, older people, I will say, late teens and into adulthood, have a high likelihood of being a vector. We might see our staff wearing masks and shields. Some of our older students maybe will require to wear them, but our younger students don't appear to be vectors of this disease, and it doesn't look like we'll have to require them to wear it. Um, let's see if there's any questions I can get into right now. Um, I see one about e-learning. So let me jump into instruction, because we're opening up 5 days a week. Our plan is for as many people to come back into our buildings as possible. Um, but we know that probably most of our families will decide to go. That seems to be a pattern in other countries. When they open up, it's very few people have stayed home. So that's what we're expecting. But we also know that some people are going to be in kind of a wait and see mode. They're going to be afraid, and they really aren't going to be completely confident. So we might start the year and they might want to keep their kids back. We don't want those children to lose out on anything. So a component of our return to learn plan is going to involve using technology to support what's going on in the classroom. We're already building plans to start live streaming some of our classes, building in recording devices. So if people find, that they can't send their kid or don't feel comfortable right at the beginning, that they won't miss out on content, and we'll kind of keep this synchronicity with our students and our teachers. Um, we also know that there are some students who are going to have some affirmed health reasons, and they won't be able medically to attend school until maybe symptoms are back to normal, or maybe their home situation gets straightened out, where from an affirmed health reason they can come back. And it's those students that we're really concerned about as well. So building a plan where we can keep those kids in our district, keeping them learning and in sync with what the rest of the class is doing, so they're not missing out on content, is a big crux of our return to learn plans. We're buying the technology, and we plan on training our staff to be ready for that come fall. Let me just address a couple of questions. I think I answered what will our days be next year. We're starting on August 31st. We're not planning on alternating days. We're planning on 5-day-a-week instruction. Graduation comment, thank you. Some of the good news that's come out of the governor's move to phase 4 is that we can in fact have gatherings of 100. Given our class sizes, we will plan on having an outdoor graduation on June 28th. That's all good news. Do you anticipate there will be an option for e-learning if we have high-risk family members and don't feel comfortable with in-person in the fall? Yes, I think I just addressed that, but let me double down on it. If you don't feel comfortable, we know that's going to be an issue, and we want to provide a plan for you. If you have a health situation and a doctor saying we recommend don't come, we're elevating that to a different type of situation, and that seems to be more longer term, and we'll put plans in place for that. So we kind of have 3 tracks that we think kids are going to be on: in person, kind of a wait and see mode, and then I just can't send my kid to school because of health reasons. relying on one-to-one technology is going to be a big component of that. There's a question about discretionary remote class participation, cameras in the classroom. So I'm not sure exactly what is meant by that, but you know, choosing to come and choosing to stay, I know we're going to have to deal with that. I would say this about the way it's kind of shaping up as we go through, preliminary plans for this. It will look different than what your sons and daughters and you've experienced at home in this latest distance learning plan. We had to fit our plans into the hole that the governor gave us to fit it in. We couldn't just come up with something and say this is how we want to do it. We were given restrictions on how we were supposed to do it. Our return to learn plan for the fall will look a little differently. I would say there will be more time spent on content, and there will be greater expectations for participation and grading. Again, we want to work with people. That's why we're kind of putting them into different groups. If your health concerns at home are affirmed and you can't do that, then we will have a different plan. If you just don't feel comfortable, then we want to have you kind of getting up, getting ready for school, and following along in sync with what the rest of the students are doing. What about rumors of no playgrounds? That's just a rumor. We plan on using our playgrounds. There may be some restrictions on how many kids can participate in one area of the playground at one time, but we want them outside. And again, we're dealing with much smaller class sizes than a lot of our peers that surround us. When we release a grade, we're releasing 40 to 60 kids, and some schools, when they release a grade, are releasing hundreds of kids. So it's different in different school districts. In Whitmore Lake, we won't be bound by many of those restrictions. There's a question about using one teacher all day. Again, we don't plan on doing that right now. That type of modeling is something we might look at if we get a resurgence of the virus. We haven't thrown it out completely, but we build our teachers to have certain content competencies, and we know we're going to be dealing with lost content when our students start in the fall. That's something every school is going to be dealing with. I sometimes say, like, if you have a second grader going to third grade, starting the third grade is going to almost be like a 2.5 at first. We're going to have to go back and start to redo some of the things that we expected to get done in April, May, and June. So mixing up the teachers, making them specialize in areas they're not truly competent would only hurt that outcome. So I don't plan on doing that. Gym, playgrounds, switching classes for specials. Again, we plan on doing it. We plan on just maybe not doing it en masse, but we plan on sending kids to the music teacher, to the gym. What we might restrict is how they get there and how many kids are interacting in the hallway at any one point in time. Here's a good question by Julie Berger. It's about losing teachers with more virtual learning and educational budget cuts. That's been on the minds of our business office, on our Board of Education, because we get a lot of negative information from the state saying, hey, prepare for this cut. It's going to be bad. It's going to be bad. I'm taking a much more realistic approach. It's a little bit more optimistic. I would tell you, if budget projections that some people have put out there at $700 to $1,200 per student reductions, if they go through, half the schools in the state are going to quickly go into deficit. So I just think that's an unrealistic option. And I mean, if you really need to rebuild your economy, and we really need to rebuild our economy, we really need to have our schools open and not shutting down because of a financial crisis. So the rebuilding of an economy and keeping the schools uh, economically viable have to go hand in hand. That's just a very pragmatic and practical assessment of how our society works. So I do think it's been overhyped. The negativity's been overhyped, but I do believe there will be some kind of reduction in state aid. So Whitmore Lake Public Schools is planning on it. We will spend some of our reserves that we've built up over the last 6 years to kind of, weather that hit. But it certainly won't bankrupt us. And, um, and um, that's kind of how I plan on starting the year. I don't think virtual education is going to completely take over our educational system. I don't feel there's an appetite for that among our parents in this community. But again, I will say there's been some positive things that come out of it. A lot of people tell us that they really enjoy kids working at their own pace. They enjoy some of the project-based approach that we've done, and we like that feedback. So um, we might use our technology a little differently, and we might adjust our calendars a little differently to really tap into those instructional changes that parents enjoy. Um, I want to catch up on these questions a little bit, but what will be the response if a student has had COVID related symptoms? Um, we won't treat symptoms any differently than we would any other symptom that we experience at the high school. If we know kids are sick, we send them home. And where our reaction might change is that if we get a positive or a confirmation of a COVID case, um, and then we might have to have a different plan. But right now, the plan involves notifying parents, letting if we feel we've got the situation contained, letting them choose how they want to handle sending their kids to school. But again, having these options available, and that's why the technology platforms that we're putting in place are so important. Um, uh, we already have kind of I don't like to use the word quarantining system, but we already do have a system where if kids come down and report that they're ill, we do have areas where we place them so they're not, possibly infecting other kids. And again, our community is a little different. Some schools, when they call home and say, please, your kid's not feeling well, um, they can't. They stay there all day. They don't have that option. That's really not how we do business in this community. So I think our normal protocols will stand the test of time on this one. Someone asked how lunch will work at the high school. Again, we do have smaller lunches, but there's usually one lunch at the high school that gets pretty packed. Right now, we run 2 lunches. We'll probably run 3 just to space it out a little bit better. And we might even put some options in place to start utilizing our gym during lunch, just so we can spread people out a little bit more. We've played with those things in the past. Our 7th and 8th graders love it when we open up our gym. It lets them burn off some energy at lunch. It's like a mini recess for them. It was well received, and so we might take advantage and do those things again in the fall. But expect 3 lunches this coming fall, just so we can, keep things spread out. Um, we have 10, 12 seat tables. We'll probably reduce those to 6 and 5 seat tables. Lindsay Collins asked, what are the strategies to deal with learning losses from this year's schools closures? How we start the year, reviewing materials and content that should have been taught more explicitly in March, April, and May will be one way to address it. Summer learning camps, which we hope to be given the green light for, will be another way that will address it. Will there be more strict regulations sending your child to school with symptoms or illnesses? Yes, expect screening. If you wake up and your child is complaining of a fever and you send them to school anyway, and we measure temperatures and we see fevers, and we'll probably be contacting you if we see that to be a particular pattern. Yes, we will be working with you on individual parents on what we expect and how their actions related to sending their kids when they're not well to school impact all of us. And we plan on using our remote learning technologies to assist in that. A question about volunteers. So we will continue to use our volunteers, but we'll probably have in place for non-school personnel. We'll use safety forms that will be required to fill out, and anybody who can't answer all of our safety questions will not be allowed to volunteer until they can answer affirmatively that they don't have any symptoms or haven't been around anybody that has expressed symptoms. So we do plan on using volunteers, and we welcome them, but they're because we don't interact with them as employees as tightly as we do our employees, we will be asking for more information. And if they don't meet the criteria, then we won't be able to use them until they can meet that criteria. They're good questions. It wasn't a dumb question. Thanks. We're doing a good job, team. I appreciate that. I have been inspired by the way our teachers interact with our students and our parents. They they didn't let the online barrier get in the way. It was so neat to see how teachers reached out and were able to virtually embrace each student and continue doing what we think we do best, which is personalize our education and meeting the needs of each individual kid. Another question about lunch. Will in-house lunch and breakfast be offered? Yes, I think we're going to have to offer those. I mean, part of that is a federal mandate, but we are looking at it a little differently. Each building, each grade level, uses the cafeteria differently. If you're, in the elementary school in the morning, you see this kind of flow into the cafeteria. You see breakfast being eaten. If you're in the high school, and you have like an 11th or a 12th grader, our parking lot, we start school at 7:50. Our parking lots for students are sometimes empty at 7:40. At 7:45, there's a trickle at 7:48, and we start at 7:50. At 7:48, it's full. And then there's this mass rush of kids that come in, and breakfast isn't always available to them. So we are looking at how we start our day. What is there a way to kind of ease that quick rush, give them a chance to spread out a little bit? All those things are components to what we look at every year, but there's more of a microscope on it. So I don't have a definitive answer for you, just that it's a variable that we want to try to control. What about assemblies, field trips, family events, North Pole? Plan on doing all of that. Again, a lot of it is voluntary participation anyway, but except for in-school assemblies. You're saying to your entire student population, come into one area and sit really tightly together. I would say to that question, if we're in phase 6, which might not happen in September. A lot of people say it will happen in the fall, but aren't giving a specific time. If we move to phase 6, then I don't know that that's so much of an issue. But if we stay in phase 5, assemblies might be limited. We could probably do them outside, but as you move closer and closer to colder weather, that won't be an option. So traditional activities like North Pole Night and things, I'm expecting them to happen, but if we stay in phase 5, we might have to restrict how many people can come into our buildings. Well, thanks for bragging about us. We we get certainly get a lot of criticism that comes part of the job. If something happens and people get scared or their child expresses anxiety, we know it tends to have we're going to take the brunt of that, whether it's our fault or not. That's something that we're used to dealing with. But I also know that we've done a lot of good things, and I don't like to pound my chest about it. I like it when you guys pound your chest and tell them how great we are. So thank you. Please keep doing that. Do you anticipate a time when a mandatory antibody or virus testing is criteria for attendance? Again, I really got to rely heavily on our health departments and CDC for that. The health department hasn't given me definitive answers to that. Um, uh, just that they're progressing towards a capacity where they feel more comfortable that they can get more testing done at a faster rate. Um, so I would say if we reach a capacity where we can certainly test all of our school personnel and students, um, then I think it probably will be mandatory, at least until um, the overwhelming fear of this virus gets under control. But I don't have a definitive answer, just a thought process there. Um, okay. Um, let's see. I don't see any other questions that I haven't addressed. Maria or Karen, if there's something that is in this group chat that I just missed, that kind of um, a line of questioning that I kind of didn't answer well, please let me know.
Looks like you got most of the questions. I think one topic you haven't mentioned is busing. Will anything change relating to transportation or busing?
Was that a question in the chat? Because I was trying to avoid that one.
Oh, sorry. You should have told me in advance.
No, only because I don't have a lot of answers with it. It's a big question across the board in the state because um, we cannot. I mean, it's going to be challenging to meet distancing expectations in buildings. You certainly can't do it on buses. So, there are some options, but quite frankly, if I start telling what the options are, I don't want to spread misinformation. So, I'm going to give one of those ambiguous statements I don't like to make, but those are the cards I'm dealt. So that's the hand I'm going to play. Uh, we will make sure that we meet all safety criteria if we open for all of our buildings and our buses. You'll likely see drivers with masks on, and you'll likely see drivers who occasionally take temperatures of students. That's very much how our buildings are going to operate. If I'm given more restrictions, we do have some plans for how it would work. But again, if I start talking about it now, I don't want people to panic and say that's how it's going to be, because quite frankly, even if we're in phase 5, if it looks like we're progressing towards phase 6, I think people's fear of using buses in schools are going to go way down. The key to all of this is managing, symptoms, looking at symptomology, and having a robust testing platform. We can't control the robust testing platform, that's out of our control, but assisting in the management of symptoms is within our control, and that's what we want to try to be active participants in. And that's, our buses are like our buildings and our fields. It's anywhere we have Whitmore Lake Public Schools name, we want to assist in that management of symptomology. It's not much different than how we manage the common flu, but some of the devices we'll use will look different in the fall. When would tryouts be for fall sports is a question. So again, the MHSAA, which is the High School Sports Association, they govern how tournaments run, and they give us eligibility standards. They have laid out some guidelines for outdoor activity, not yet indoor activity. But they are waiting for phase 5. If phase 5 comes on July 4th, like the governor has planned or has stated, then we'll likely move inside with activity and then start preparing for tryouts. Typically, tryouts are in August for fall sports, but there's camps, and there's activities that people do. We are telling our basketball coaches, our volleyball coaches, our cross-country coaches, our football coaches, all of our coaches, you can do things. It just has to be outside, and the volume of kids has to be limited. But those things were already in place before COVID-19 hit. So with the exception of having to be outside, but many of our programs chose to be outside with the exception of basketball. So that's what we're letting our coaches know. But we can't start any of this until our official last day, which for Whitmore Lake is tomorrow, June 5th. Most schools in the state started after us, so they're not going to be done until next week. I think you're going to start seeing a lot more clarification on athletics after next week. There's a question that uses the term gut feeling. Oh boy. I have a lot of gut feelings.
So you don't get stolen.
Oh, that's pathetic.
Yeah.
What is your gut feeling on the level of fear overall for the school children and their families? My thought being there is a high level and it tends to spread. Okay, so the parents who I've talked to, when I tell them that I'm planning on having school in the fall, want to jump out of their car and embrace me. So I'm thinking that there's a level of trust. I'm thinking that the fear level will quickly, if it does exist, will quickly go away. I just know that there are going to be some people who just aren't sure, and I want to be considerate of those feelings. I've been sharing this study with my peers and with people on our administrative team and some of our teachers. But if you look at Europe, some of the schools, countries that closed and then reopened, there were fears expressed. In fact, Germany and Denmark, they had 50% of their parents say, "You can open your schools, but we're not sending them back to school." When Germany and Denmark opened their schools, less than 1% of the parents kept their children at home. And so I can go out and I can ask people, "Are you afraid?" I expect the answer to be yes. But the reality of the situation is, synchronous learning in a classroom, communicating on content expectations is done best in that classroom environment. And if we can make it safe, then I think parents are going to send their kids to school. Everyone's kind of on a different continuum, though, and we want to be respectful of it. Any thoughts on having late season softball, baseball for elementary age kids? We'll see. I don't have a definitive answer for that yet, but I drove by the Legacy Center yesterday. I saw kids out on the fields. I know Ohio has basically given all baseball programming the green light. We are starting to allow some of our facilities to be rented for those activities. I don't know that if a program wants to use our facilities, we're probably not going to be restricting it as long as they can give us safety protocols that meet our expectations. I don't see any more questions. Let me just kind of highlight what I've talked about. If you came in late, we are looking at the assessment of how our distance learning programs worked for the past few months. We did put out a survey and got some good information, really, showing where we're weak and where we were strong. Please, if you haven't taken that, please fill it out because we will be using it for decision making. We are looking at trying to develop our summer programming. That depends largely on if we can move to phase 5. If we get to phase 5, we know that we can open our buildings for instruction. It also will drive how we react to our athletic programming. Those things look like they're going to happen because it does look like we're on a positive trajectory towards phase 5. And then for the fall, our return to learn plan will involve 5-day-a-week instruction. We expect most of our parents will be sending our kids to our school. We are enhancing technology in all of our classrooms to accommodate parents who don't want to send their kids immediately, or and then having plans for parents who just can't send their kids to our schools because of affirmed medical reasons. There will be an increased use expectation for all students with Chromebooks. It's very likely that your student will be given the option to purchase a Chromebook, and if they cannot purchase one, then they'll be given one by the school, and they'll have to maintain that in each of their classrooms so they're not sharing that device. Um, and that will alter some of our instruction. So a lot of our teacher training will be involving how to best use those devices so we don't lose anything on our instruction in the fall. Um, and uh, and then, of course, as I get more and more information from CDC and as it filters through our health department and into our county, I will certainly be updating you. Um, right now, a lot of it's speculation, but our return to learn plan does involve spreading high congregations points of students out and taking temperatures and potentially putting our staff and our older students in masks. That the last one though, I'm still waiting on some confirmation because there are some legitimate health concerns that go along with that we want to be respectful of.
Tom, it looks like you missed a question about class sizes from Lindsay Collins.
Um,
Uh,
Smaller class size. So, we tried to address this just with a broad stroke, but I'll certainly be more explicit. Um, I don't think there's anything we can do about um, our current class sizes, um, uh, but I have to wait to see what the enrollment is. And a couple of comments on it. First of all, I said this before, but I'll reaffirm it. It does not appear that smaller children are vectors of this disease. Information we get varies, but it looks like mid to late teens and into adulthood appear to be the primary vectors of it. So I don't think class size, cutting, a class of 25 down to 12, for instance, is going to be a reality. That being said, it's in the column to be considered, and we do have other buildings in our district, and we could move things around. So, if that's the case, so it's not the A plan right now, Lindsay, but it certainly is on the B plan. Should reopening require us to reduce our class sizes and really adhere to strict social distancing, then we do feel we have capacity in our younger grades to do that. Anything else, Maria, that I missed?
Real quick, the transition from distance learning to getting back in the classroom for those parents who are apprehensive about starting the fall in the classroom, can you indicate how that will happen? Will it be a smooth, you're saying it'll be a smooth transition since the distance learning and classroom learning will be closely connected?
I think the expectations are going to be increased. I think if you're a parent that wants to wait and see, you're going to likely be given the option of buying a Chromebook or being delivered a Chromebook. But the expectations are you'll have to adhere to what we call a synchronous type of instruction. So, you'll be watching, your teacher deliver content, and there'll be pauses where you can interact at home with the content and the information, and so the teacher can assess your learning of it alongside all the other kids that might be right in front of her. That's different than what we did, much different than what we did in the spring this year. In the spring, it was, kind of we rolled into this enhancement model, and then we tried to move forward with our content, but there were restrictions on that. So I think saying it's going to be seamless depends on the user, but our professional staff will make it as seamless as possible. I think the expectations will be different, and it will look different. So if people are thinking, hey, I love this. April was awesome. May was awesome. I do caution you that if you want to roll that out, things are going to look different. But I guess I would end this diatribe about that question with I do want to give more information on it in August when I expect to have better guidelines from our health officials. And I think some of the fears about coming back to school will be continually going down. But I know it's going to exist for some of our families. So it is part of our plan. All right. I'm not seeing any more questions come in, and I don't want to go through my repeat of everything I just said, but um, for those of you that joined, thank you. And if you have a burning question that you didn't feel comfortable putting it into the chat group for people to see, um, I guarantee there's somebody out there that has the same question. So please feel free to send it to me via email. And if you just want a little bit more personal communication on that, um, and please feel comfortable doing that. And then regarding communication like this, I don't have a schedule for when I'm going to go back. I'm kind of watching the information. We work as a county. 3 times a week we get together and we discuss how things are rolling out in every different school in our county. I do it with Livingston County as well, and sometimes we find things that this is really good, we have to share this, or this is something that people should prepare for, we have to share it. So when that stuff comes up, I will certainly plan another one of these Zoom meetings, but it's not on the schedule yet, but I anticipate doing it in the future. So if it was helpful, please tune in again. All right. Other than that, thank you.